Hi, this is Captain Ross from 3B's Captain School, and this is our assistance towing equipment video. All right, towing equipment. When towing, we always want to use the proper equipment for the task. Using the proper equipment minimizes accidents and increases proficiency. So this equipment includes our tow lines, pennants, bridles, deck fittings, general hardware, fenders, drogues, and lines. Remember, line is just a rope that has a job. All right, tow lines, usually double braided nylon, which gives the best combination of strength and stretch. The towing vessel's construction, power, size, and fittings determine the tow line size. The proper tow line size will allow the vessel to tow up to its design limits. So basically, you want the tow line to be the lowest rated item as far as strength and braking strength in your whole setup. You'd never want a tow line to part because, like we discussed earlier, it can part with some pretty severe consequences. But out of all that equipment, you'd rather have the tow line part than rip the fitting off your boat, the tow bit, or break your boat. So the tow line is the item in that whole rig that has the smallest braking strength. So you want to eye splice the end of it. You don't want to use like a bowl and to tie a temporary eye in the end of a line or any kind of knots if you can avoid them. A couple things happen with knots. One, they reduce the braking strength of the line, and some of them reduce it quite dramatically. Also, knots, the bowline's pretty easy to untie. It's a breakable knot when you get done. But most other knots, once you've put all that tension on them by towing a boat in, you can't untie them anymore. And then you've got a line, with whatever specific knot you use for that tow. You can't really use it for anything else because it's got this big gnarly knot on the end of it you can't untie. Offshore and heavy weather, a towing vessel may need up to 500 feet or more of tow line to keep the towed vessel in step and minimize the effect of shock loading. Most of the reels of the nylon lines come in 600, 900 feet. So, order a 600-foot length and then maintain at least 500 foot of it on your boat. So a warning again, don't increase the tow line size or the circumference of the tow line to increase towing limits. You want to purchase the line that matches the towing limits of your boat. All right, let's go over some of this equipment. Tow line, it's best stored on a tow reel. So you're going to roll it up on this reel, and then when you're using the tow line, like we just talked about, you want at least 500 feet out, or you may need that much if you're towing offshore, bigger seas, or far distance. But regardless of what you got, you always want to keep at least 4 turns on the reel, and then you're working it off a bit. It's going to come off the reel, it'll go to a tow bit, and those 4 turns give you some extra line so you don't accidentally slip the whole line out over your bit or you're not paying attention. So remember, minimum of 4 turns. When you're putting it into service as a tow line, you want to splice the eye at both ends. If you've ever spliced an eye into a double braided nylon line, it's pretty easy if the line's new, extremely difficult if the line's been used and it's had some tension on it. The core and the cover don't really slide as nice as they do when it's new. So go ahead, when you get it, either order it with 2 ends spliced, it's the easiest thing to do, or splice the 2 ends yourself. Then that way, if you happen to chafe one end, you can just switch them out on your tow reel and at least use the other end for a while. Normally, if you have 500 or 600 feet on there, you're going to use 200, 250 feet of it most of the time. Rarely use the whole thing. So usually switching it out, you've got a good section of line there. Remember, safe and efficient towing requires an undamaged, serviceable tow line. If you find damage to the tow line, you should either repair it if you can. If you can cut the eye off and splice another one in, if you can still splice it, you want to do that immediately as soon as you see that damage. You regularly want to inspect them for cuts, chafing, flattening, fusing, snags, hardening. So this right here is a spliced eye on the end of a line. You can look at this splice right here. It's got a little bit of oil or something on it, which could deteriorate the line. Then if you look at the eye splice, the throat right here, you can see it's coming out and there's some damage to the tow line. So this would be a compromised eye splice in a tow line. If I'm just using this to, dock my 19-foot skiff or something, I'm not as worried about that. But if I'm towing vessels with this, I need to address this damage in this tow line here. All right, it's not always possible to safely attach a tow line to a single point on the bow of a disabled boat. So I like to carry pendants, or it's like a single leg piece of line, same circumference or size as the tow line, spliced at both ends. And I use this, one, if I need to attach to a boat for some reason I can't get my tow line in there. Two, I use them all the time if I'm going to use a single point tow, because I'm not chafing or damaging my tow line. This is kind of like a sacrificial line. It needs to be kept in good condition and replaced if it's got damage, but I'd rather chafe through or damage this, 10-foot double-eyed pennant than the whole tow line. And this is what a pennant looks like. So we've got it right here connected to a tow line with a shackle. So a bridle is another attachment you can use on the end of your tow line. We're talking about a Y-shaped bridle. And we use this a lot, but you want to be able to rig both legs up to the tow. So let's say you have a boat you're towing, they have two forward cleats, one on the starboard bow, one on the port bow. You go cleat to cleat with the bridle. Bridles give you a much better tow than a single attachment point. So if a lot of boats tend to yaw, and that's where they kind of veer back and forth as you're towing them. And most of the time, a little bit of yaw is not that big of a deal, but if it starts yawing with any kind of size, or the yawing gets big, it could cause the vessel to capsize. So you really need to kind of address the yaw. What happens at a bridle is if it starts to veer to one side or the other, the bridle tightens up on that side and kind of pushes it back towards the middle. So it'll keep it towing nice and straight. When you use a bridle, you want to make sure the legs are long enough that you can maintain an angle of at least 30 degrees, of less than 30 degrees, of less than 30. So you don't want the angle greater than 30, because once you start getting a bigger angle, it starts putting too much tension on one side of that bridle or the other. And always use chafing gear when you're attaching it to a disabled vessel. So here's a bridle. I've got a tow line coming in, shackle, two equal lengths, equal circumference tow lines, both with a eye at each end. Again, long bridle legs reduce tension on deck fittings. Short bridle legs, which increases the angle, increases the tension on those legs. So less than 30 degree angle, long legs. All right, when attaching the bridle to a tow line, use thimbles where the bridle connects to the tow line to prevent chafing. So here's a couple pictures of some thimbles. They come in different sizes and shapes, and if you've got these available, you want to use these when you're attaching to the tow line, because it'll help that. You're trying to avoid line on line, because that can kind of build up some heat as you're towing in and cause chafing. You can also use bridles if the towing vessel is not equipped with a centerline towing capability. Like you don't have one center tow bit on your boat. You've got like outboards or rigging. And basically what you're going to do in that situation, you can see in this diagram here, I'll take my cursor. I've got an outboard here. This is the stern of the vessel. And I've built a bridle I can attach to my port quarter cleat, starboard quarter cleat, and then attach the tow line behind the outboard. So this angle, you can go 30 to 50 degrees is where you want to be. Remember, when you're attaching this bridle to the vessel you're towing, you want that angle less than 30. But in this situation, you don't necessarily need to go back that far. You can take it 30 to 50 degrees off the towing boat. So one of the problems with this rig, use it if you have to, but it's hard to adjust the tow line length if you've got it set up right here behind you. So bridles, you can use them on the disabled vessel, prevent yawing. If they have like rudder issues, it helps tow them straight behind. In heavy weather, it just gives you better control of the boat than a single attachment point. And I can use them on a towing vessel if it has an outboard and I don't have a bit in the center of the boat to help me tow. Messengers. So a lot of times the tow line's too heavy to cast more than a few feet. And unless you can come along right alongside the disabled vessel, if the weather's really good and the waters are calm, you can come right alongside and just hand it to them. But sometimes you got to keep some distance between the boats so that you don't accidentally get pushed into them or hit each other. So in those situations, you want to use a messenger line. So heaving lines or messenger lines are usually made of light, flexible line, and they're either formed at the end into a monkey's fist, which is a knot, or they have like a big rubber ball at the throwing end. So here's a diagram, and this is a monkey's fist right here, and it gives it some weight at the end of the line so I can throw that line. And I would attach, if you can see here, they've tied this one off with some half hitches. It looks like a clove hitch with some half hitches to the throat of the tow line, and then, or a pennant there. You throw that heaving line over, and then the crew on the disabled vessel pulls that messenger heaving line in until they get to the tow line. Then they make the connections on the boat. Another way you can tie them together is a double becket bend. So I've got a smaller heaving line here, if you look where my cursor's pointing, and I've tied a double becket bend into the eye of a tow line. And this end right here represents the messenger line. You have a monkey's fist or something on the end, and I can toss that over to the other boat. Here's a clove hitch, a slip clove hitch I've tied on the throat of a tow line. It's another way to connect the messenger line to your tow line before you send it over. Deck fittings. So gone over these in your OUPV course. Everybody's seen these on boats. Got bits, a cleat, closed chalk, open chalk, a bollard, a roller chalk, a towing pad eye. And these are attachments on vessels for tow, mooring, and anchor lines. Common fittings, the cleats, bollards, Samson posts. You want to inspect these on your boat periodically for cracks, fractures, corrosion, rust, and maintain them. Because if you're going to use one of these to tow consistently, you want to make sure that it's in good working order and strong. Skiff hooks. Skiff hooks are used to attach a tow line to the trailer eye bolt on smaller vessels. So this is a typical skiff hook. So I've got a smaller circumference tow line spliced directly into the end of this skiff hook. This one has this little bar welded onto it, and you basically drill a hole in the end of a boat hook and place this in the boat hook, and then you can reach over and snap this hook here on a trailer eye bolt on the disabled vessel. And I don't have a picture of a trailer eye bolt here in this slide, but you know, the eye bolt you use to hook up the towing strap when you're trailering a boat. So you don't want to use these on larger displacement vessels. These are definitely designed for smaller vessels. Drogues. All right, so these are the devices that add drag to the towed vessel, and that drag is used to kind of control the vessel's motion. So either it's got a jammed rudder, you want to control it from veering to one side or the other, or you're towing through an inlet, you're going to have following seas, and once you get closer to the inlet, you'll notice the seas get steeper and usually a little bit closer together, so it might mess up your ability to keep the vessel in step. So these are pretty critical to keep the towed vessel from surfing down the face of a wave, keeps them nice and tight behind you. If you combine a bridle and a drogue, you usually have pretty good control over the vessel you're towing in through an inlet, even if it gets a little bit squirrely. So that's what a drogue is used for. Here's some different drogues here. You can see they all are different shapes. They look like water parachutes, I guess. If you notice here where my cursor's at, on the back of this drogue, there's a trip line here. So the main line here is connected to the towed vessel, either port or starboard side, or if you use a bridle directly in the middle. Usually just tie it to one side or the other, it works fine. And this is going to cause a lot of drag. So when you're ready to pull this thing in, sometimes it's difficult for the people in a disabled vessel to pull it in. So they have this trip line. It's a really small line. It's attached to the apex or the back of the drogue. And then you take this line. It's usually a little bit longer than the line that you're using to tow the drogue. You tie it off to a cleat on the boat. And then when you're ready to pull it in, you just pull this small line, and it'll basically trip this drogue, and you're able to pull it in pretty easily. Not against the resistance from the open drogue. So we have alongside lines, very smaller lines used to tie off the towed vessel and alongside tow and the towing vessel to the dock. You want to have enough fenders, both to protect, if you're going to take them inside tow, put between the two vessels so you're not banging against each other, and then to put on whichever vessel you're putting to the dock. So you want to make sure you have enough fenders. Then you got to have extra shackles, snap hooks, carabiners, swivels, and any kind of other items you might use in a towing evolution. And that is towing equipment. This concludes our assistance towing equipment video. Please check our YouTube channel for other videos for assistance towing.